Alright, so this video is for pages 3 and 4 of our classwork packet, which we did in week 8 in class or in Zoom. So if you missed that class or you need a little bit of extra help before we turn in our final body paragraph, then this video is for you. What I would suggest you start with is going into Schoology under this folder and starting with this Pear Deck. We started with this Pear Deck in class, and it's like a PowerPoint that we're going to go through and make sure we know what embedding or blending quotes looks like. Once you've done that, you'll want to come back to the Chapter 3 close read and annotate it. So I'm going to annotate this one with you, and then you'll see we're writing a topic sentence and we're working on textual evidence. So the first thing you need to do is read the prompt, right? What are we looking for? What am I trying to find? And all of that good stuff. So you're going to read the following excerpt from Night and annotate it, focusing closely on the tone, and then answer the following prompt about textual evidence. So you guys should be clicking in now how to find tone, and then what we're doing is we're using it to pull out quotes for the E in our CER paragraphs. Explain how the author describes the first night in camp. So if we're looking for the tone, we need to find the speaker, the subject, and the attitude. And that will give us our tone. So in this case, who's our speaker? Last week it was a little bit different, but for the most part, we can just assume that our speaker is going to be Wiesel, our author, right? Because this is a memoir, it's written in first person. So our speaker is going to be Wiesel. Now, to find the subject of this excerpt, you could either, again, read the whole excerpt and decide, what is this all writing about? Or sometimes you can get that information straight from the prompt. So if the prompt is explain how tone, or explain how the author describes the first night in camp related to tone, this is telling us here what the subject is. This whole thing is going to be about the first night in camp. So that would be your subject. And then finally, how does Ellie Wiesel feel about the first night in camp? That's going to give us our tone. Now that we know what we're looking for Ellie Wiesel's attitude about the first night in camp, we're going to go ahead and annotate this. Remember, annotating online, you're just going to highlight and click this little blue box, and it'll leave you little notes over here. If you're doing it on paper, then you can do it however you'd like. So I'm going to read the passage first. This is from page 43. Remember now, at this point in the book, Ellie Wiesel has gone from the ghettos to the cattle cars to his first concentration camp. They've gone through selection and he's lost half of his family, right? It's only him and his father at this point. And so we're going to see what his first night in camp has done to him. So I'll read it once first and then we'll annotate it. Never shall I forget that first night, the first night in the camp which has turned my life into one long night, 7 times cursed and 7 times sealed. Never shall I forget that smoke. Never shall I forget the little faces of the children, whose bodies I saw turned into wreaths of smoke beneath the silent blue sky. Never shall I forget those flames which consumed my faith forever. Never shall I forget that nocturnal silence which deprived me, for all eternity, of the desire to live. Never shall I forget those moments which murdered my God and my soul, and turned my dreams to dust. Never shall I forget these things, even if I am condemned to live as long as God himself. Never. So if you were with us on close read number 1, you remember that we decided the tone was really hopeful, optimistic, unknowing, pretty content, maybe even happy. And this one has taken a very drastic change. It's a big turn, right? Just off the top of your head right now, we could probably decide that this passage is a little depressing, right? He's gone through a lot in only one night. So let's start by annotating it. The first thing that I hope you noticed is how many times he says, never shall I forget, throughout this passage. It's repeated, which is repetition, and it's actually repeated 7 times. If you were doing this on your paper, you could go through and highlight each of the 7, but for the sake of how messy it gets over here, I'm just going to write it here. And what repetition does is it really emphasizes things. The example I used in class was the I have a dream speech. If we've ever listened to that speech or read that speech, you'll know that he says I have a dream multiple times throughout because he's trying to emphasize it. In this case, what is never shall I forget emphasizing? It's emphasizing how the sights he's seen are unforgettable, and not in a good way. So the only reason that I counted how many times he repeats "never shall I forget" is because in the same sentence it says 7 times sealed and 7 times cursed and 7 times sealed. Is it coincidental? Not sure. But after looking this up on the internet, I found out that 7 is a really religious number. And we know that Ellie is super religious. So maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it has something to do with his religion. But 7, to my knowledge, and maybe you know more about it if your family is very religious or if you are, it's a complete number. So there's 7 angels, there's 7 steps, and once you complete those 7 steps, you are considered to be complete within your religion. So I thought it was interesting that he mentioned 7, and it's repeated 7 times. Never shall I forget that smoke, never shall I forget the little faces of children, whose bodies I saw turned into wreaths of smoke beneath a silent blue sky. So, silent blue sky, that's an interesting thing to write. Why is he calling the sky silent? Well, it has to do with his religion, right? Typically in religion, if you're praying, you would metaphorically be praying to the sky, right? Looking for answers. But you know that looking up into the heavens, that's where we usually presume God to be, or your God, or whoever you worship. So Ellie right now is looking up at the sky like, why am I seeing babies being burned? Why am I seeing families being separated? Why did I just lose half of my family? And he's getting a silent return. So God isn't really there for him right now. He's asking the hard questions that Moshe the Beetle told him to ask to be close to God, and he's not receiving answers or comfort. And remember, at this point, Elie Wiesel is 15 and he's deeply religious. So this would be extremely hard for him right now, first as a 15-year-old, and second as somebody who believes that God is taking care of him and his religious people, and now he's seeing what's happening. Never shall I forget those flames which consumed my faith forever. So first thing I would note to you, flames which consumed, this is personification, which is a literary term. It means to give human-like qualities to things that are not human. So the flames are consuming. They're consuming his faith forever. The next thing that I would write is his faith is being consumed, which means it's kind of wavering. Right, he's kind of on the fence right now about how he feels about his religion and about his God. And remember, this has only been one night. Never shall I forget that nocturnal silence. Here's the second time he notes God as silent, which deprived me for all eternity of the desire to live. So after one night, he's seen such horrific things that he is losing his desire to live. This shows that Elie Wiesel is becoming hopeless or defeated, broken down, right? And it's quite the stark difference from chapter 1, when they're in the ghettos. Right? In the ghettos, they're like, oh, it's only going to be a short amount of time, and we're hopeful that it'll be quick. And now he's seeing what Moshe the Beetle had been warning them about the whole time. Never shall I forget those moments which murdered my God and my soul and turned my dreams to dust. Loss of religion, right? And this would be huge to Elie Wiesel. Never shall I forget these things, even if I am condemned or punished, to live as long as God himself, never. But we've annotated our passage and got to know it a little bit more. If you go back up to where we were trying to decide the tone, it's your job now to decide, how does Elie Wiesel feel about his first night in camp? He's not having a good time. He's quite depressed. You might say miserable. He's angry. We've heard confused, questioning, traumatized, disheartened. Any of those words would work. And what I would expect at home, since you have access to the internet, that you're using that 155 tone word list. So once you find your tone, for this sake I chose angry. Uses an angry tone. You're going to fill in this topic sentence. So in the book, Night by Elie Wiesel, the author uses an angry tone in order to what? And this is where you're writing your reason statement, which is from video 1. So if you're having trouble with the reason statement, go back to video 1 and watch that one. But for the sake of this video, we're working on textual evidence. So if I decided that my tone is angry, then I need to find 2 quotes that support that. For a CER paragraph, you would have 2 quotes, textual evidence 1 and textual evidence 2. So these 3 pieces here are coming from the Pear Deck that got us ready to be able to complete this part of it. If you haven't yet and you need to, go back and look at the Pear Deck where we break down these 3 parts. For this, the first part, and probably the easiest, is going to be the citation. The citation is just the page number. And you'll know the page number because I've listed them at the bottom of your close read. So your citation already done. You're a third of the way done with embedding your textual evidence. The second piece you're going to need is a quote. So my job is to go back up into the close read and find a quote that demonstrates an angry tone. And there's quite a few of them, right? There's a lot of strong words here. For my paragraph, I'm going to use "which murdered my God and my soul." And I'm just going to paste the quote here without doing anything to it, without transforming it, without embedding it, right? This is my quote. So in order to write an introduction to the quote, an introduction is just the words before the quote that let the reader know what's happening in the story. So with your knowledge of the book, because you're up to date on reading and your understanding, you need to tell me what's happening in the book. So like I said, we've already gone through the ghettos. We've been on the cattle cars and now we're in the concentration camp. So it could be something as easy as Ellie's first night in camp, first night in the camps, or like after Ellie has made it through selection and entered the camp. Or anything else that's going to give your reader a sense of where we are. You need to pretend that the reader has never read Night and you need to inform them what's happening in the book. It's going to make your writing really elevated and it's going to help your readers and the flow of your sentences. So once you have your introduction, your job is to write it as fully embedded. From the Pear Deck, we know that fully embedded means blended, it means really smooth, and you're not using things like the author says or the author states. If you have not done so, again, go back to the Pear Deck because that's going to take you from a 3 to a 4 when you write your final body paragraph. So go ahead and pause the video, work on your sentence, and then click and I will show you my example and explain why it's embedded. You've practiced writing your introduction and your textual evidence. Here is my example. On Elie Wiesel's first night in the concentration camp, he witnessed many horrific scenes that murdered his God and his soul. So I chose this quote because I think it shows that it's an angry tone. I have a quote, a citation, and all of this is my introduction that tells us about what's happening in the story. If I read this out loud to you and you closed your eyes, you would not know where this quote started and stopped because it's fully embedded or blended. The only thing that might be jumping out at you right now is unfamiliar are these brackets around the word his. So if I'm blending a sentence and trying to make it sound like one fluid sentence, I need to change these words. If I didn't, it would sound like this. On Elie Wiesel's first night in the concentration camp, he witnessed many horrific scenes that murdered my God and my soul. The way that it sounds now sounds like it's murdering my God, Miss Miller's God, and we don't want that. So option 1 is working better. You can change these to fit the structure of your sentence as long as it doesn't change the meaning. For your CER paragraph, you would repeat this process twice and have 2 pieces of textual evidence.